March 1242. Across the mire-clogged plains of Hungary, an army that had instilled global terror was retreating eastward. These were the Mongols, unmatched cavalrymen who had dismantled formidable empires stretching from China to Persia. Merely months earlier, they had dealt Hungary an overwhelming defeat in one of Europe's most devastating historical conflicts. Vienna, the nucleus of Western Europe, was practically at their mercy. Yet they abruptly reversed course. The puzzle of why an undefeated army, poised to conquer all of Europe, suddenly abandoned its ambitions seemingly had a straightforward answer for 800 years. However, recent analyses of climatic data, archaeological findings, and military assessments have uncovered a far more intricate and surprising truth. Please leave a comment sharing your location and the current time, as I'm genuinely curious to know which corners of the globe are tuning into this narrative. Today's story delves not just into the history of a powerful empire, but also how the convergence of forces beyond anyone's full control can reshape the destinies of an entire continent and the course of history itself. To grasp the profound significance of the Mongol retreat, we must journey back to 1206. In that year, a man named Temujin achieved what seemed inconceivable. He united all Mongol tribes under a single banner. He adopted the title of Genghis Khan, the universal ruler, and from that moment, he began constructing humanity's most expansive continental empire. The Mongols' power stemmed not solely from their ferocity. They possessed an incredibly refined military system. They could traverse up to 100 kilometers daily, 3 times the speed of European armies. On the battlefield, they communicated using signal flags and whistling arrows. Above all, they were unparalleled masters of psychological warfare. When Genghis Khan died in 1227, his third son, Ogedei, became his successor. Ogedei lacked his father's strategic genius, but he excelled at utilizing talented individuals. Under his command was Subutai, the greatest military mind in Mongol history. It was Subutai who masterminded the European military campaign. In 1235, he presented Ogedei with an audacious plan to assault Europe simultaneously with 5 advances. The objective wasn't merely plunder, but to seize territories extending to the Great Sea, meaning the Atlantic Ocean. In 1236, approximately 150,000 Mongol horsemen crossed the Volga. They swept through Eastern Europe like a tempest. Volga Bulgaria fell. Russian principalities were conquered one after another. Kiev, the jewel of Kievan Rus, was utterly decimated in 1240. But Subutai's primary target was Hungary. Why? Because Hungary served as the gateway to the heart of Europe. There was another reason: the Cumans. The Cumans were a nomadic tribe inhabiting the Russian steppes. During the Mongol invasion, roughly 40,000 Cumans fled into Hungary seeking refuge. King Bela I of Hungary welcomed them, even styling himself as the King of Cumania. For the Mongols, this provided a pretext for war. In late 1240, Batu Khan, Genghis Khan's grandson, delivered an ultimatum to Bela: surrender unconditionally or face complete annihilation. Bela did not respond. A looming storm gathered over Europe. In March 1241, 3 Mongol armies entered Hungary from 3 distinct directions. This was Subutai's classic tactic: divide and conquer, then regroup for the decisive strike. Batu Khan and Subutai led the main forces, advancing through the heavily fortified Varek Pass. They decimated the army of Count Denis Tamay in mere hours. A European observer likened their advance to lightning. Bela attempted to prepare. He ordered the construction of dense natural barriers along the eastern border. But the Mongols had specialized engineering units. They cleared these obstacles in only 3 days. Meanwhile, another Mongol army advanced through Poland as a diversionary tactic. On April 9, 1241, at Legnica, they confronted a coalition of Poles, Moravians, and Knights Templar, commanded by Duke Henry II. The battle was a terrifying demonstration of Mongol strategy. They repeatedly employed feigned attacks and sham retreats, drawing the heavy European cavalry out of formation. They used thick black smoke to create confusion, and once the enemy was disorganized, they encircled and annihilated them. Henry II was killed. The Mongols severed his head, impaled it on a spear, and paraded it through the city. Within weeks, they collected 9 full sacks of the ears of the vanquished. Yet this was merely a diversion. The real battle unfolded in Hungary. On April 10th, a Hungarian army, numbering between 60,000 and 100,000, reached the banks of the Sajo River, near the village of Mohi. They outnumbered the Mongols 2-1. Bela was confident, overly so. That night, the Mongols attempted to cross the bridge, but were repelled by Hungarian crossbowmen. The Hungarians believed they had won. They returned to their encampment to celebrate, leaving only a modest contingent to guard the bridge. This proved to be a fatal miscalculation. In the early hours of April 11th, the Mongols launched another assault. This time, they employed stone-throwing catapults, launching incendiary projectiles, a Chinese gunpowder innovation. However, this was merely a direct attack designed to divert attention. What the Hungarians did not realize was that during the night, Subadai had led 30,000 horsemen on a flanking maneuver to the south. They located a ford to cross the river and constructed a makeshift pontoon bridge. As the sun rose, Subadai emerged at the rear of the Hungarian positions. Bela I suddenly found himself surrounded. He ordered his entire army to retreat to the camp. But the camp was poorly designed by Bela. It was too cramped, tents were tightly packed, and the wagons, arranged as walls, actually hindered movement. Batuk, observing from a hill, noted that they were compressed like livestock in narrow stalls, with no room to maneuver. The Mongols began to bombard the camp with incendiary bombs. Smoke and flames filled the air. The Hungarians panicked, and then Subadai executed his renowned tactic. He deliberately created an opening in the encirclement. King Bela IV, seeing an opportunity for escape, fled. When the Mongols made no attempt to stop him, the entire Hungarian army, abandoning their weapons, surged through this gap. This was precisely what Subadai intended. As soon as the Hungarians left the camp in disarray, breaking formation, Subadai gave the signal. Mongol cavalry attacked from all directions. The historian Fomasay Plitsky, witnessing the aftermath, wrote, "When the Mongols perceived their adversaries exhausted from running, incapable of raising their arms to fight or their legs to flee, they began to overwhelm them with spears from all sides and cut them down with swords, sparing no one, slaughtering them like animals. To the right and left, they fell like leaves. In winter, the entire route was covered with their wretched bodies. Blood flowed like a river. 60,000 Hungarian soldiers perished. Almost the entire nobility and military leadership of the kingdom were annihilated. King Bela IV escaped death thanks to his heroic guard and Batu's order to capture him alive. He fled to Austria, but Duke Friedrich, who should have been an ally, imprisoned him and extorted an enormous ransom. In the ensuing months, the Mongols systematically devastated Hungary. They seized the royal seal from the body of Vice-Chancellor Bela and forced captured Hungarian scribes to forge a proclamation in the king's name, directing the populace to remain in their homes and not fear, as the king would soon retaliate. This ingenious deception allowed the Mongols to roam the countryside unopposed and kill thousands. Approximately 25 to 50% of Hungary's population, possibly up to 500,000 people, perished that year. It was one of the most horrifying humanitarian catastrophes of the Middle Ages. In the winter of 1241 to 1242, Europe was consumed by terror. News of the disaster spread across the continent. People whispered dreadful things about the Mongols. They were barbarians. They had no religion. They ate human flesh. In reality, the Mongols were not cannibals and were tolerant of their captives' religions. But in the European imagination of the 11th century, they were associated with Gog and Magog, the forces of evil from the Bible, prophesied to emerge at the end of time. Even the name reflected this fear. The term Tatars, or Tartars, originally used for nomadic peoples of central Russia, was expanded to include the Mongols. Why? Because in antiquity, hell was also known as Tartarus. In 1241, Emperor Frederick II of the Holy Roman Empire wrote that he hoped the Mongols would be cast back into their Tartarus. But fear could not substitute for preparation. European kingdoms were unable to cooperate with each other. Pope Innocent IV called for a crusade against the Mongols, but there was insufficient support. Bela sent letters pleading for aid to the Pope, the Holy Roman Emperor, and the King of France. No one responded seriously. They seemed not to grasp the threat. Meanwhile, the Mongols prepared for their next advance. They crossed the Danube, the final barrier, in the winter of 1242. Mongol scouts penetrated deep into Bohemia and reached the outskirts of Vienna. Batakan's forces poured into Austria, Dalmatia, and Moravia. Where there was resistance, they relentlessly slaughtered the population. Where there was no resistance, they compelled men into Mongol military service. Vienna, a wealthy city, a cultural center of Europe, lay directly before them. And beyond Vienna lay all of Western Europe, Germany, France, Italy, Spain. Nothing stood in their way, save for one thing. On December 11, 1241, in Karakorum, the capital of the Mongol Empire, 8,000 kilometers east of Hungary, the great Khan Ogedei went hunting. That evening, he drank with friends. Ogedei was known for his alcoholism. His brother Chagatai had even appointed an official to monitor his drinking habits, but Ogedei still found ways to drink. It is said that he pledged to reduce his daily cup intake, only to then commission cups twice the original size. The following morning, at dawn, Ogedei passed away at the age of just 56. The likely causes were speculated to be a stroke or organ failure due to excessive alcohol consumption, though rumors of poisoning also circulated. In the Mongol tradition of succession, upon the death of a great Khan, all princes were required to return to Karakorum for a Kurultai, a council convened to elect a successor. This was an inviolable law. By early 1242, news of Ogedei's demise began to spread. When the news reached the Mongol commanders in Hungary, their response was unexpected. Despite advice from Subutai, they chose to retreat. This is the conventional explanation we have accepted for 800 years, and it sounds logical. But a deeper investigation reveals a more complex narrative. Firstly, the timeline does not align. Ogedei died in December 1241. The Mongols began their withdrawal in March 1242. It would have taken a messenger at least 3 to 4 months to travel from Karakorum to Hungary, even under optimal conditions. The historian Rashid al-Din, drawing on Mongol sources, wrote that Batu Khan learned of Ogedei's death after he had already reached Kiev, having completed nearly a quarter of his journey home. Secondly, and more crucially, Batu Khan never returned to Mongolia. He remained in southern Rus and consolidated his power as the ruler of the Golden Horde. He did not attend the Kurultai. Why? Because he harbored a deep animosity towards Guyuk, Ogedei's son. He knew that if he traveled to Karakorum, he would face significant political jeopardy. So, if Ogedei's death wasn't the sole impetus, what else contributed to the decision? In 2016, a research team published a groundbreaking study in the journal Scientific Reports. They analyzed dendrochronological data, tree rings, which annually record climatic conditions, from the Austrian Alps and the Romanian Carpathians. Their findings fundamentally altered our understanding of the Mongol withdrawal. From 1238 to 1241, Europe experienced unusually warm and dry summers. This climate was ideal for the Mongol army. Their cavalry required vast pastures for their horses, and dry, firm ground facilitated rapid movement. European observers even noted the heat that afflicted Hungarian soldiers at the Battle of Mohi on April 11th. However, in early 1242, the climate abruptly and dramatically shifted. Summers became cold and wet. Torrential rains transformed the Hungarian plains into an immense swamp. This might seem like a minor weather change, but for a nomadic army entirely reliant on cavalry, it was catastrophic. Firstly, the boggy terrain reduced available pasture land. Each Mongol rider needed multiple horses, typically 5 to 7. An army of 40,000 men translated to 200,000 to 280,000 horses, all requiring daily sustenance. When the grasslands were submerged, the horses lacked forage. Secondly, the mud severely hampered mobility. The Mongols' greatest strength, their light cavalry, designed for speed and maneuverability, became clumsy in the deep mire. Rapid encirclement tactics and lightning raids became impossible. Thirdly, and perhaps most critically, there was a food crisis. The Mongols had ravaged Hungary for a year, killing 25% to 50% of the population and destroying most settlements. Who remained to cultivate crops? Who was left to provision a massive army? Researchers concluded that the subtle climatic shifts of 1241 to 1242 were significant enough to alter the conditions under which the Mongols initially invaded Hungary. These changes would have prevented them from effectively operating as an occupying force, compelling their withdrawal. Yet, even this isn't a complete story.
For centuries, the narrative of the Mongol invasion has been told from the perspective of the conquerors. Hungary was vanquished, Europe was defenseless, and only Ogeday's death spared Europe. However, recent scholarship, particularly by Hungarian historians, has unveiled a different picture, one of resistance and costs. While it's true the Mongols decisively won the Battle of Mohi, the subsequent events are far more intricate. Hungary had one critical vulnerability in 1241, a lack of stone castles. King Bela I and his predecessors had prohibited nobles from constructing private fortifications, fearing this would lead to a decentralization of power and a powerful aristocracy. Consequently, most Hungarian defenses were composed of wood, clay, and earth, unable to withstand Mongol siege machinery. Nevertheless, some stone castles did exist, and in these locations, the Mongols encountered serious difficulties. The Klis fortress in Croatia, where King Bela I sought refuge, successfully resisted capture. The Mongols besieged it, but failed to conquer it. Many other strongholds across Hungary similarly held their ground. While Mongol cavalry dominated open battlefields, they struggled with prolonged siege warfare. Following the collapse of the official Hungarian military, a guerrilla movement emerged. Survivors from the royal retinue who hadn't reached Mohi, alongside armed peasant militias, engaged in partisan warfare, harassing Mongol forces. They targeted supply convoys, ambushed small patrols, and occasionally even achieved victories in direct confrontations. Hungarian historians suggest that the organized resistance of the Hungarian people, though not extensively documented in Western chronicles, played a much more significant role than previously assumed. It impeded the Mongol war machine and made each Mongol advance more costly. Then there was Vienna. Vienna was a large, affluent, and well-fortified city. Duke Frederick II of Austria, despite his animosity towards King Bela I, was a skilled military commander. He mobilized his units of heavily armed knights and learned to counter Mongol tactics. His strategy involved active defense. Instead of awaiting a Mongol siege of Vienna, he intercepted their smaller detachments. In the autumn of 1241, he defeated Batu Khan's forces in battles along Vienna's perimeter, from the Wienerwald to the March River. These victories weren't decisive, but sufficiently demonstrated to Batu Khan that further progression would not be straightforward. Germany and the rest of Western Europe were better protected than Hungary. Their populations were considerably larger, and they now had time to prepare. Recent archaeological investigations also indicate that the Mongols sustained far more substantial losses in the Hungarian campaign than ancient sources reported. It was not an easy endeavor. Every fortified stronghold, every guerrilla ambush, every engagement near Vienna, all diminished the Mongols' strength. Batu Khan faced a difficult choice. He could either continue the assault into Western Europe with a depleted army and unfavorable weather, confronting a prepared enemy, or retreat, consolidate his conquests, and get ready for a more formidable future campaign. Then came word of Ogeday's death. So what truly prompted the Mongols to withdraw from Europe? The answer doesn't lie in a single cause. It was a convergence of multiple factors, each playing its part. Ogeday's death initiated a political crisis. The Mongol Empire lacked a clear system of succession. Each time a great Khan died, the threat of civil war loomed. Batu Khan, while not returning to Mongolia, understood he had to safeguard his interests. He couldn't remain too far from the center of power for an extended period. Climate change transformed Hungary from an ideal base into a logistical quagmire. The Mongol army, accustomed to dry steppes, struggled to operate effectively in marshy terrain. Their horses starved, supplies dwindled, and long-term occupation became impossible. Hungary's military resistance near Vienna and the potential of a better organized Western Europe escalated the cost of every advance. The Mongols weren't invincible. They could triumph, but at what cost, and with their already weakened army? Could they retain what they conquered? And perhaps there's one last factor seldom mentioned. The original objective might have been achieved. Some historians posit that the primary goal of the invasion wasn't the conquest of all Europe, but rather the punishment of the Cumans and those who harbored them, especially Hungary. If so, after the complete devastation of Hungary, the mission was accomplished. Subutai, the brilliant strategist, undoubtedly advised continued advancement. He recognized this as a once-in-a-millennium opportunity. But Batu Khan and the other princes declined, not out of fear, but because they calculated. They perceived the risks, weighed the expenses, and chose to retreat. This is a crucial historical lesson. Major decisions rarely stem from a single cause. They are the product of numerous intersecting forces: political, environmental, military, and even individual psychology. In the spring of 1242, the Mongol forces withdrew eastward. They left behind a ravaged Hungary. King Bela I returned to his kingdom from his refuge in Croatia. What he witnessed must have been heartbreaking: ruined cities, burnt villages, abandoned fields, and a population reduced by a quarter, if not by half. But Bela did not surrender. He had learned a costly lesson. Over the next 30 years, he transformed Hungary into a bastion. He initiated one of the largest castle-building programs of the Middle Ages. By the end of his reign, Hungary boasted nearly 100 new stone castles, compared to only 10 in 1241. He also reformed the army, emphasizing heavy cavalry and crossbowmen, weapons that had proven effective against the Mongols. He invited new settlers, granting them conditional nobility in exchange for fully equipped military service. He established contact with Venice to secure the services of at least 1,000 skilled crossbowmen. These endeavors proved fruitful. In 1285, 44 years after the initial invasion, the Mongols returned, this time led by Nagain and Tula Bugi. They followed the same routes as Batu and Subutai, but encountered a transformed Hungary. Stone fortresses now obstructed their advance. Local inhabitants provisioned their strongholds and employed scorched earth tactics to deny sustenance to the invaders. King Laszlo I strategically avoided decisive engagements, instead utilizing guerrilla warfare and ambushes. Talibuga, commanding the main forces in northern Hungary, found his progress halted by heavy snowfalls in the Carpathians. His army faced dire circumstances due to logistical challenges, particularly a severe lack of provisions, which claimed thousands of soldiers' lives. Some accounts even mentioned an outbreak of disease. Ultimately, the Mongols retreated once again, achieving nothing this time. Hungary endured. For Europe as a whole, the Mongol withdrawal in 1242 held immense significance. It averted a scenario in which the entire continent might have succumbed to Mongol conquest, as happened with Rus, China, and Persia. Later European chroniclers lauded this event as a divine intervention. Giovanni del Carpin, a monk who visited the Mongol court in 1246, wrote that God caused the Great Khan's death to safeguard Latin Christendom. However, as we observe, the reality is far more intricate and, in some ways, captivating. It was not a miracle, but rather a confluence of geopolitical circumstances, climatic shifts, human tenacity, and well-considered strategic choices. So, what does this narrative reveal to us? Firstly, it underscores that no power is unconquerable. The Mongol Empire, the largest in history by territory, possessed its limitations. These boundaries were not just military, but also logistical, environmental, and political. Secondly, it highlights the importance of preparation and learning from experience. Bela I suffered a catastrophic defeat in 1241 because Hungary was unprepared. Yet, he absorbed the lesson, and 40 years later, Hungary was ready. The disparity between the two invasions lay not in luck, but in readiness. Thirdly, it exemplifies the power of resilience. Hungary lost between 25 and 50% of its population. Cities lay in ruins, the economy collapsed, yet they rebuilt. Not swiftly, not effortlessly, but they accomplished it. This speaks volumes about the human spirit.
Fourthly, it reminds us of the environment's role in history. We often perceive history as solely about persons, monarchs, commanders, and decisions. However, climate, geography, and the natural surroundings also play a crucial part. The wet summer of 1242 impacted European history as significantly as any battle. Finally, and arguably most importantly, history rarely offers straightforward answers. For 800 years, we had a tidy story. The Mongols retreated because Ögedei died. Simple, memorable, easy to teach. But when we delve deeper, examining climate data, archaeological discoveries, and forgotten records, we uncover a far more complex and rich narrative. And this is what makes history so compelling. Not because it provides simplistic answers, but because it reveals the complexity of reality and how numerous diverse forces, from climate to politics, from individuals to state structures, interact to shape the destinies of nations and continents.
On a muddy spring day in 1242, a historical opportunity vanished on the roads of Hungary. Subadai, the greatest strategist in Mongol history, credited with over 60 victories, cast a final glance westward. He knew they would never return, and he was correct. The Mongols never again approached Europe so closely. Had they pressed on, had the weather been different, had Ögedei lived longer, had Bela I been better prepared, history could have unfolded entirely differently. But it did not, and in the chasm between what transpired and what might have, we discover one of the most enthralling tales in human history. If this video has offered you a fresh perspective on a pivotal turning point in history, please click the like button and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell so you don't miss future in-depth historical narratives. Leave a comment and let me know which factor you believe played the most significant role in saving Europe. Ögedei's death, the weather, military resistance, or a combination of all three. And if you appreciate historical stories told in this manner, respecting complexity, grounded in research, yet engaging and accessible, share this video with your history-loving friends. Because history is not merely about the past, it is how we comprehend the world in all its intricacy, uncertainty, and the difficult choices people confront in every era. Thank you for watching. See you in the next video.